working drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Working Drummer Podcast. I'm Zach Albetta, and today we are venturing across the pond to London to talk with Lauren Kosty. Lauren is a drummer and percussionist who moved from LA to London a year and a half ago, and not long after moving there, she started touring with crossover artist Russell Watson, who combines operatic singing and some classical repertoire with various pop styles. Before moving there, Lauren had built up quite a resume in LA, which included John Williams, Brian McKnight, P. Diddy, and many others. She's classically trained, but she has a huge skill set beyond orchestral percussion that has enabled her to bridge the gap between the classical world and the pop world and really play just about any type of gig you can think of. This episode is sponsored by Sakai Drums. You know the Sakai sound, now get to know the Sakai name. Trusted around the world for almost 100 years, Sakai's devotion to craftsmanship and passion in creating the world's best quality drums is unmatched. Handcrafted in Osaka, Japan, Sakai offers the most versatile drums from the Trilogy Vintage series to the modern almighty Japanese birch recording kit, each boasting a distinct sound and feel. Go to sakaidrums.com to learn why studio legend Eddie Bayers, the Smashing Pumpkins' Jimmy Chamberlain, and Tedeschi Trucks Band's J.J. Johnson and Tyler Greenwell choose Sakai. Elevate your sound with Sakai. That website, again, is sakaedrums.com. If you haven't already, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Share pics of your gigs using the hashtag WorkingDrummer, and we welcome comments and messages on social media. It's great to hear from you all about what you like about Working Drummer Podcast, suggestions about what you might like more of, and please feel free to leave us a rating and review on iTunes. So now here's my talk with Lauren Kosty. It's a really good look at classical versus pop and LA versus London. Hope you enjoy it. I'm so interested to hear about London and kind of how day-to-day life feels there and how, like, what the music scene is there.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of session work, but like what else goes on there?
It's diametrically different than LA. Like, that was one of the first things I figured out moving here. I feel like if you took LA and New York and put them into one city, you could then maybe get close to how much music is actually going on in London.
Really?
And when you talk to the guys in London, you know, they're not necessarily comparing it to LA or New York if they haven't worked there. So, you know, musicians kind of have that thing of, oh, there's less work than there used to be, which is probably true. But considering, like, in this city, there's 5 major orchestras.
Wow.
There's there's more theaters in the West End than there are on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention 2 operas and 1 or 2 ballets, plus a lot of scoring work and a lot of session work, and the whole, British pop scene too. So, like, it was definitely, I wasn't prepared for that when I moved here. I just thought I was moving to another kind of similar size industry as was in LA, and then when I got here kind of realized, wow, it's really big.
Right.
And it's big to the point where instead of there being like one circle of musicians who all know each other, there can be someone who plays like orchestral percussion in London that you've never met before. Whereas in LA, like, every orchestral percussionist knows every other one, you know?
Right.
So
and it's the same, like every jazz
Yeah.
drummer knows every other one, and it's, wow. So, but you're saying, like, there are still orchestral percussionists in London that you don't know.
Yeah, because there's 5 orchestras, and so there's probably 4 or 5 players in each.
Right.
Of course, I'm new, so I don't really know everyone anyway, but it's just a bigger pool of people, and I think that's really nice because it's just, there's always new people to meet, and you don't always see the same faces everywhere.
Right. It's hard to imagine a bigger pool than LA, but
I know.
Yeah.
That's what I thought too.
So, like, what was your lead time? Like, how much time did you have to sort of prepare and make some contacts before you actually moved?
Well, pretty much zero. I honestly knew nobody when I moved here.
Wow.
It was a big risk to take, I think, but I was supposed to be on this tour. Actually, Jamie and I were going to be on the Jesus Christ Superstar tour.
Oh, you were on that too.
Yeah, I was going to play the percussion book on that.
Man, yeah, he told the story of that whole debacle on this podcast.
Okay, yeah, so you know that it got canceled 3 days before.
Yes. Yes.
So that was going to be a really nice way for me to meet a lot of London people, because like all of the cast and crew, I think, were all UK, and then at least two people in the band and the MD were London musicians.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been perfect.
Right.
Had that worked out, and obviously, what happened, and it didn't, and so it was kind of, it was hard to get over.
Yeah.
when that didn't happen, but I still went for it,
Right.
And I'm totally glad I did.
Yeah, yeah. What was the reason that you moved to London?
So my partner, she's British,
Mm-hmm.
and actually we met in LA. She was living in LA, but she had some family stuff come up that she had to move home for. So she moved, and we did a couple years long distance, which, as you can imagine, was really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I kind of came to this point where it was like, okay, what are we going to do? It's now or never, because we can't keep going on like this.
Right.
Because not only is it, another country away, but it's 8-hour time difference away too. So it's really hard to keep in communication with people. So I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out, I can always come home. I know a lot of people back home in LA,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to forget who I am. It might take me a minute to get integrated back into working a lot for as much as I was, but you just don't get the opportunity to live in Europe, I mean, who gets that opportunity? I just had to do that. And I knew that of all the places that she was going to move to, it happened to be London, which is maybe the best city in the world to be a musician in. So, I just took a leap of faith. Yeah. And here I am.
Yeah. And it's so, it's great because, people often think of being in a relationship as a hindrance to, having a creative career. But like I'm kind of in the same boat. Like I moved to Atlanta because my wife got a job here, and I think people have made sacrifices that hindered their musical careers. But in your case, in my case, it actually furthered it. You ended up in a place where there were more opportunities and different opportunities that you wouldn't have had otherwise, because you were willing to follow your partner to this place.
It's funny. I mean, obviously, I took 2 years to make the decision, so it was not an easy decision to make.
Right.
And it wasn't easy on our relationship during that time either. But one thing Tatum said to me, that's my partner.
Yeah.
She said, she showed me a little meme, and it was a circle that says your comfort zone, and then outside of the circle where the magic happens.
Right, I've seen that.
And at the time I was like, oh God, that's so easy to say. Can it live up to that? And now on the other end of it, at least for me, I feel like it absolutely has lived up to that. And I do feel like I have been pushed, like in a way I never would have been pushed if I'd stayed, basically where I grew up, where I went to school,
right,
and where I knew everybody, to going to a giant city where I knew no one.
Right.
And it was, I came in with a good attitude, I think. I kind of came in thinking, all right, I'm going to have to work hard, and I'm going to have to get to know people and work to get to know people, because these people probably all went to school here and know each other here. So, but I've also kind of got the mentality of like, you play music with your friends, you get to know people, you do music with them, that leads to something else. So trying to do it organically has been important too. So when I first got here, I was just hitting the practice room every day. I took the opportunity to learn something new. I had mostly been a percussionist prior to coming here, and there's a studio that I've been practicing at called Bell Percussion, and they had just rehearsal rooms, and got to know them, and they helped me out, and so I just would go there and learned a bunch of kit stuff. Just started, expanding what I know how to do, and that was really, really fun.
Yeah, I noticed in your pictures with help me out. What's his name?
With Russell Watson.
Yes, Russell Watson. I knew you as strictly a percussionist in L.A., and you moved to London, and all of a sudden there's all these pictures of drum sets on gigs, and I'm like, wait a minute, well, I didn't know that. So that was something that you sort of were you into drum set as a younger player, or was that something you had to kind of start from scratch on?
I started more as a percussionist, really. Came to drum set later on, as you do, because you kind of learn the marimba and the timpani and the glockenspiel, and it seems natural to then learn the drum set.
Right.
Whereas you see, I think there are a lot of students who start on drum set and then expand to percussion. So
right. That was me.
I was a little bit backwards. Yeah, I was a little backwards in that case. But I had started studying and working on the kit in LA, but I never thought of myself as a drummer. I always thought of myself as a percussionist, and still do.
Right.
I tell, when people ask, I say, oh yeah, I play drums and percussion. I'm more of a percussionist who plays drums than a drummer who plays percussion.
Right.
But for the Russell gig, it was just kind of like perfect because he's a crossover artist, and he does everything from like opera arias to musical theater to folk, rock, pop. Right. So, like, we played everything from The Phantom of the Opera to Adele to Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah.
To, Puccini.
Right. And your setup looks so cool. It's like, your setup is this, it takes up an entire room almost. But it's it's everything. It's actually kind of the culmination of a college career. Like, if you think about all the shit you work on in your average sort of college percussion program, like, it's all there in your setup. There's orchestral percussion and hand drums, and like I'm like, there is a gig out there that is the result of.
I could be the poster child.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I had timpani, glockenspiel. I had SPD pad, full drum kit, and then kind of groove station with like congas, cajon, shakers, tambourines, stuff like that.
Wow.
So that was for me a dream come true because I got to use all of the skills that I've learned in one gig.
Yeah. So what was the process of getting the drum set going once you got to London? Like, were there styles you focused on, or was it physical independent stuff, or what was the journey?
I kind of said to myself I was just going to start by focusing on 3 styles, like jazz, funk, and rock, just to try and, because it's like a huge universe of technique and style and the depth of being a kit player. You can just focus on that for an entire career. So
right.
I needed to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
So I did that. And, I got out like the Rick Latham book. I got out, I'm trying to remember some of the other books that I was working out of at the time. What is it? Independence? No, the one everyone works out of. Now, of course, I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, Syncopation?
Syncopation. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, stuff like that. And then I got together for a few lessons with a drummer called Pete Cater, who does a lot of big band stuff, and he showed me some things. And, of course, when I was back home in L.A., I played for Jamie.
Yeah.
He's such a good buddy of mine, and everything he says is gold, so I try to play for him every time I can.
Right.
So that's how I kind of started, and then this audition came up for the Russell Watson gig, and I had fortunately been working. When it came up, it was like, we need someone who can play kit, timpani, glockenspiel, groove percussion, and I went, I can do all those things.
Right,
I will take this audition.
So it was just an open audition?
Yeah, it was. I was on a listserv, actually, called Media Match. I was just, I didn't know anybody, so...
Right.
It popped up in my email one day along with, it sends me like 3 or 4 emails a day about teaching gigs or, casual gigs, and that one popped up. And I thought, oh, why not? I'll go for it. And I went up to Manchester to take the audition, and just everything really clicked with the MD and everybody at the production company.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the call later, and they invited me on the tour. So we just finished, actually. Last week we finished 60-date tour all over the UK.
Wow.
Went to England, Scotland, and Wales.
Cool. That's amazing. So
it was.
So it was just like a single round audition. Like you didn't have to go back or do a rehearsal or like a trial date, or
there were a few steps to it. Like the first step was like a CV resume thing, and I sent links to, I have like a YouTube channel and a SoundCloud with examples of my playing.
Right.
Sent that to them, and then they got back to me. It was funny because one of the ladies from the production company called me and said, okay, we just have 2 questions for you. One is, can you sight read? And I'm like, yes, no problem. And then the second is, do you have a car? And I went, whoa, because I had just moved here,
Yeah.
I didn't. I said, well, technically I have a license, but I don't really have a car right now. I had to be honest. And she said, oh, okay. And, she said, we'll get back to you. And I thought, oh, I'm not going to get the call.
Oh, God, how much would that suck to not get the gig because you didn't have a fucking car?
I know. So I thought I wasn't going to hear back after that. But I did. They got back to me and said, yeah, we'd love you to come out. So then they invited me to the audition. They must have narrowed it down at that point.
Right.
And they sent us like 2 tunes and then asked us to play a third kind of like improvisation. And they sent the tune to us like the day before. And so, it was not a whole lot of prep time. They just wanted you to kind of come in and read it. So,
right.
It was really fun. I remember I wasn't nervous before the audition. I mean, I had like normal nerves, but I wasn't overly nervous because to me at that point I was like, you know what? I'm in a new country. Like, I don't know anyone or anything. This is my first time out the box. I'm just going to go for it and have fun and just see what comes of it. And it was funny also because I had laryngitis at the time.
Oh, God.
So they had to call Russell. I think they had to tell Russell, don't come to the audition because he's a singer. Obviously,
right.
He's not going to want to be near me. And he's like in the studio recording his album right now.
Yeah.
So I go, I go in there and I'm like, hi.
Oh, no.
It's Lauren, which kind of broke the ice, to be honest.
Right. So what exactly did you have to play in the audition? Was it playing with an ensemble or just by yourself or along with tracks?
I played with the MD.
Okay.
Played piano. We did I Dreamed a Dream from Les Miserables, and one other was more of an operatic aria, and I can't recall what that was. And then I played a solo improvisation. So 2 of the tunes were with MD, and 1 was solo.
Wow. What did you do for the solo improv?
I basically just wanted to showcase some different styles and transitions between the styles. So I started on like cajon with some bass drum and hi-hat in addition, so I wanted to kind of show a little bit of versatility. And then I kind of figured out a transition and went into, I think it might have been sort of that classical crossover pop style, just trying to show that I can do that.
Right.
And then I think I finished with some rudimental, like funky rudimental stuff, like second line grooves.
Yeah. Cool.
To show a little bit of chops. Yeah.
Right. That's so interesting because I think, when I think of, okay, play an improvised solo, like, my background is so jazz heavy that I think of that as like, okay, they want to hear my creativity now. They want to hear my artistic, whatever. But you took it as an opportunity to say like, okay, I'm gonna just showcase all the shit that I can do, that stylistically, and in terms of like, basically not saying, check out my creativity, but check out all my styles, check out all this stuff I can do that you can use.
Right. Well, especially for that artist too, because he is a crossover artist and there are so many types of tunes that we're doing in his gig.
Right.
I thought that was going to be a really nice way to say, oh yes, here's how I'd approach these different styles, and be able to kind of show that in the audition seemed really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they did kind of say, when they gave instructions, to kind of show a little bit of yourself in the audition as well. So it's funny, I brought, when I do like a solo percussion or like an acoustic groove percussion rig,
mm-hmm.
I'll bring like little jingly bells and little sound effects, just little finger cymbals and things. So I brought those just for fun, and I think that the MD really liked them, because then later on he wrote for some of those sound effects that I had brought to the audition.
Yeah.
And so it was, I think, an opportunity also for him to see or be inspired, like what kinds of things he could write for you as a player.
Right.
So that was a good learning moment for me too, to sort of realize that it's not just a moment for you to showcase your ability, but also for them to see your personality and how they can work with you as a player.
Like, how are you going to fit in? How can we use you?
Totally.
You talked a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in LA?
Yeah, I did.
And did you have like the typical high school track of playing in band and marching band and all that stuff?
Exactly.
And it was percussion kind of from the start, not drum set.
Yeah, because I played in the school band in elementary school, and I was 10. I thought I would join the band, and of course I picked the drums because they were the coolest instrument.
Well, of course they are.
And my friends were doing it, But yeah, I just fell in love with it and kept doing it. And the district I grew up in had a really strong music program, so I was lucky enough to kind of have that available to me.
Yeah. What district was that? What neighborhood were you in?
So I grew up in Thousand Oaks, which is about an hour north of LA, and the district was the Conejo Valley Unified School District.
Right, okay.
And so we had a huge marching band in high school, but we also did percussion ensemble,
mm-hmm.
Orchestral. I guess it wasn't an orchestra, actually. It was a symphonic band.
Right, okay.
But we got a lot of different variety to the music even at that time, so it wasn't just marching band.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the big band. I was in the percussion ensemble, wind symphony, and all that too.
Yeah. And did you go to college in LA too?
Yeah, I went to USC.
Oh, USC, of course. Were you there at the same time as Jamie?
Yeah, that's where we met. It was funny
cool.
because I think he came in, gosh, I guess he was there my freshman year, but he was doing his master's degree at that point.
Okay.
And he was dating a friend of mine who I knew from high school, who was also in our music program in high school.
Huh.
So that's how we all got connected.
Yeah. So I hear all the time about the jazz program and the drum set program at USC with Erskine and then Dooku Chancellor and all the people. What was the orchestral program like?
It was cool. Again, I was always seeking versatility,
mm-hmm.
so I was definitely strongly in the concert orchestral percussion program, but I played in the Latin band. I jumped around in terms of the departments,
mm-hmm.
but SC was cool because I got, again, that opportunity to just play like in a symphony orchestra, not only a symphony orchestra, but a really good symphony orchestra.
Right.
One of the best wind ensembles, because our conductor at the time was H. Robert Reynolds, who's sort of like one of the leading conductors of wind ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
I played in with Aron Serfati in Alage, which is the Latin band.
Yeah.
So I was all over that place, and I just tried to make friends with everyone and all these, from all the different parts of the community. But at the time, I wouldn't say I was in the majority of people doing that. People tended to kind of stay in the classical or the jazz program.
Right.
So I remember I had to kind of work it out with my teacher at the time. In order to be in the big band, I had to not be in the orchestra for that semester or whatever. So there was a trade-off. But I really enjoyed my time at USC for that, because provided that opportunity for diversity, which I knew was what I wanted to do, you know.
Right. And that was, again, that goes along one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, I think orchestral percussionists in college have a tendency to just get blinders on about orchestral percussion, and they see their career track. They're like, I'm going to get out of school, I'm going to get my master's and my doctorate, and I'm going to audition for these orchestras, and I'm going to make one of them, and I'm going to move there, and I'm going to play in that orchestra and wear a tux and play classical music. So did you ever get that tunnel vision? And if not, what? I mean, it sounds like you were just kind of into everything from the start.
I was, for a little while, I was thinking about that. You know, it was definitely one of the things I thought about early on, because I was thinking ahead and where I wanted to go with this degree in music, what I was going to do with it. So, for me, it was a question of wanting to have a life where I was going to live near a large metropolitan area, because I am gay. I didn't want to end up in a small symphony in a small town and feel isolated from the LGBT community. So that was a big motivator for me to go more of a freelance route, rather than a strictly like orchestral audition route, which a lot of people did and which I enjoyed doing a lot. But also kind of just as a personal thing, really enjoy playing jazz, playing pop, pushing myself to do genres and styles that I am not as familiar with, and thus getting better at those things. So I did play around with the idea of orchestral auditions, and I studied quite a lot of orchestral repertoire. But like I said, always tried to keep my eyes open to other kinds of music as well. Yeah.
What did you audition for?
You mean which orchestras?
Yeah.
So I took, like San Diego Symphony had an audition that I went out and did, and that was really fun. I remember there was I think the staircase leading from the warm-up room to the stage was it looked like Mount Everest. I was carrying like a snare drum and crash cymbals and a tambourine, and I'm looking up thinking, hang on a second, I need to get all this gear up those stairs to the stage and then walk on and play an audition. This is crazy.
Jeez.
So it was really fun at the time, I remember, and
it doesn't sound like fun.
It was, in that it was something, because that was the first of those types of auditions I had taken. So it was something really new and, invigorating in that way of pushing yourself to new things.
Right.
And I didn't do particularly well in that audition. I remember I think I got cut after the first round. So it's funny that I have a positive memory of it, but San Diego is such a nice city, and I have a friend who plays in that orchestra now, who's a good friend that I was in school with. So
cool.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and I've done several orchestral auditions, including that one, and they're a lot of work, and I think a big payoff, but also a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah. And for most of the listeners to this podcast are drummers, not percussionists. They're playing drum set week in, week out. And may not be aware of just kind of the nature of those orchestral auditions. So talk about the preparation for those auditions and the vibe of those auditions once you get in there.
Yeah, it's funny because the Olympics have been on this last week.
I was going to say the same thing. It's that same kind of vibe. It's like you walk on and there's people staring at you, and you're on the balance beam, and it's do or die, man. You
need to execute in that moment. There's definitely, everyone approaches it differently, but the school of approach that I came from, studying with the teachers that I did, was there's a period of time leading up to the audition, maybe 6 weeks, maybe more, where you really are thinking of yourself as an athlete and devoting 8 to 10 hours a day preparing that list of excerpts from all the orchestral works on several different instruments. It's almost like a gymnast, they do the uneven bars and the floor routine and the vault.
Right.
You know, you're doing the snare drum and the, you know, xylophone and the tambourine.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got a list of these things that they're going to call out, and you don't know which ones they're going to call, and everything's got to be, as they say, note perfect.
Yeah.
So, and then as you get closer to the audition, you're doing a lot of mock auditions where you do a trial run of the audition. Maybe you create a pressure situation for yourself by inviting some people that you know are going to make you nervous to play for.
Yeah.
People get really detailed with it in terms of figuring out exactly what their diet is going to be going into the audition,
Really?
their sleeping patterns,
Wow.
because it is so precise. And to win, you know, one of those jobs when you've got 100 people auditioning for one spot,
Yeah.
it can be the difference between a missed note, a couple extra missed notes or not, you know,
Yeah.
or one missed note or one execution thing.
Right.
So you do have to split hairs as you're preparing.
Yeah.
And you do feel a bit akin to an Olympic athlete during that time.
Yeah. Yeah. So did that background make the Russell Watson audition seem more relaxed or like not a big deal? Was that why you think you were able to just relax in that audition and have fun?
Actually, no. I think in a way, an audition where you don't have prep time coming from a background of the preparation process being what gives you confidence.
Right.
And then going to an audition process where it's more just about what you do on the fly, can be really scary, because that's what built you up, was knowing I've done 500 hours in preparation for this. I got this.
Right.
Versus saying, oh, this is in me somewhere and it'll come out. So I think that's why when I approached that, or the Russell audition, I gave it some thought as to how I wanted to approach it, knowing that it was something different than I had done prior. But yes, once I got past that initial thing of being worried about like, oh, I haven't prepared, how am I going to do this? There is a little bit of like ease to feeling like it's all good. Like whatever I play, that's what I play, and I'm just going to walk in there and do that and walk away. And if I meet the demand, if I vibe with the people, if they like me, they'll call me back, and if not, I'll go to the next one.
How long were you in LA, like from college until the time you moved?
Let's see. I have to think about that for a second. So I graduated, so I started at USC in 2001. Mm-hmm. And then I graduated in 2005. That was my undergrad. And I had a few years, I think about 3 years, where I was freelancing in LA right after finishing undergrad. And then I went and did a master's degree on the East Coast for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And then I came back to LA again and was there for another, I think, 5 years. Uh-huh. And then I moved to London.
Gotcha.
So it was, obviously I would call myself a Southern Californian.
Right.
Up until about age 31. Mm-hmm. And then when I turned 31 is when I moved to London.
Okay, gotcha. And what school did you go to on the East Coast?
Oh, yeah. So I did a master's at Carnegie Mellon University.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I went to study with a guy named Tim Adams, mm-hmm. who played timpani in the Pittsburgh Symphony and had been a real inspiration to me, that I'd met at, I don't know if you know of Brevard Music Center.
Yeah.
It's in North Carolina. So I did a summer festival there for 2 separate mm-hmm. years, and he was the teacher there. And yeah, he just brought out the best in me, I noticed, while I was studying with him there, and was sort of a well-known and renowned teacher amongst percussionists. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so when I thought about doing my master's degree, CMU was on my list.
Yeah. And isn't it true about Tim Adams that, I mean, he's, one of the greatest living orchestral percussionists, but like he also goes and plays jazz gigs in the clubs, right?
Yeah. It's actually, you live in Georgia, and he is now teaching at University of Georgia, I believe.
Really, in Athens?
Yeah, I want to say UGA, is that?
Yeah, in Athens.
I think that's where he is now, because after I graduated, he moved on to a different university, and I believe that's the one.
No shit.
Wow. He is such a badass. I mean, and I talked to him about this before I went to do my master's there, because I had also auditioned at University of North Texas and Boston Conservatory, and I was really looking at schools that had that diversity element. And that's what he said to me, when I asked about it. It's like, well, Lauren, like, I go play timpani in the Pittsburgh Symphony, and then I'll go after hours to jazz and play in the jazz clubs, So I knew that was a part of what he did, and I knew that he had kind of a breadth as far as his musicianship, so that definitely attracted me to studying with him.
Yeah. So talk about the breadth of music that you got to play during your time in LA.
Everything from love doing musical theater. In fact, that's where I met you.
Yeah.
We were doing a production. Was it Hairspray or? Yeah.
There were a couple. We did Hairspray, and there was one other one. I forgot what it was. But yeah, at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy.
Exactly.
Right.
That was a lot of fun because, you get to be surrounded by, as a percussionist at least, all these instruments.
Yeah.
Of course, you're taking up a lot of real estate in the pit, so you have to be conscientious of how big is that bass drum that you're going to bring in there. Because it might be, the guitar player's elbow might end up in your drum. But no, I mean, that was really fun. Did a lot of that in LA. I played in Dave Ricard's big band. Played the Vibes and Percussion book for that band.
Yeah.
Let's see, a lot of orchestra stuff. I played with the Santa Barbara Symphony, Redland Symphony. Had the fortune to play with LA Philharmonic. I played, you know how it is. The phone rings and you never know what the gig's going to be. So sometimes you're playing like a Sunday church gig and, shaking hands and having a coffee afterwards.
Right.
Or sometimes as one case was, I got a call to play with P. Diddy at the American Music Awards. So got to go out there for the American Music Awards, and I was up on like a 20-foot tall riser with my two timpani, and that was incredible. Played a little bit with Cirque du Soleil.
Really?
At the E3 convention, we did a short-term show there.
Cool.
It was anything and everything.
Yeah, you were all over the map in LA.
Yeah.
And it was so great to see because like I got cynical about my orchestral background because I did college and grad school and the marimba and the timpani and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I thought that I kind of had to forsake all that shit because I didn't want to spend the 500 hours preparing for the audition and ending up in a tuxedo full time. Like I thought that because I didn't want to do that, I just had to turn away from it completely. But to see a career like yours, like you play with P. Diddy and you play in the Santa Barbara Symphony and you play musicals and you play at churches, like you can use all of those skills, all of those excerpts and all of those techniques that you learned in college don't have to, like, they don't just lead to one place, And I think it's the same in jazz. Like in jazz programs in a lot of colleges, you study jazz drum set, you study the great jazz drummers, and you kind of get it in your head that leads one place. Like you are studying to be a great jazz drummer. When it's not the case. It doesn't have to be that way. And in fact, I think you're better off, just remaining open to anything and everything and being able to translate your skills into anything and everything.
Yeah, it keeps things interesting.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I start to get nervous when I only get a call for one kind of gig. Like I don't want to be in a box.
Right. Right.
I did a a gig when I first moved to London that really pushed me. I was playing Arabic music with a qanun player.
What is a qanun?
It's like it's like a harp almost.
Uh-huh.
But it's, instead of being in front of you, it's on a board sitting on your lap.
Wow.
I don't know a better way to describe it than that, but it's a native Arabic instrument, and it's a beautiful, beautiful instrument. And we played this party in Hyde Park that was, I want to say it was a Ramadan celebration. And the way that this particular party was, the men and women were divided into two separate parties.
Mm-hmm.
And so they needed male musicians on the men's side and female musicians on the female side. So the qanun player was female, and she asked me to join her and a vocalist, and the three of us played this kind of music I had never played before. And then she has since invited me to be a part of the Arabic ensemble that she coaches. So I'm planning on trying to get a little deeper into that too, and it's just fun, you know.
What instrument did you play for that?
Oh, okay. So I played, I'm trying to think. I think it was a darbuka and a frame drum.
Right, okay.
Those were the main things I did for that particular gig. And I didn't really know what I was doing on that gig. But I could kind of fake my way through it, right. You know. And so, but she's cool because she teaches this style of music. So she showed me a bunch of stuff that I didn't know. It ended up being a real learning experience for me, and I was very glad with her patience with me of, showing me some of these sort of folkloric styles that she was so familiar with.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that sets you apart from a lot of orchestral musicians, or at least the idea that I have about orchestral musicians based on my experience is that a lot of them don't improvise. And a lot of them don't really develop that sort of musical intuition that you need to be able to walk into a gig like that with a person you've never met, with an instrument you've never fucking seen, and be able to do something. And I'm sure that in that situation, whatever you played, was perfectly agreeable to her. But what was attractive about your musicianship to her was your intuition and your ability to get on board with whatever she was doing.
I definitely put the ego aside in that situation and tried to be all ears about what she showed me, and kept it simple, until I felt like I was in the swing of it, and then add a little bit here and there. And we had a great time, and it came off really well too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's funny you should say that, because I think early on when I was playing percussion, I felt a little bit this is before I started improvising or doing more kind of groove style music.
Right.
I felt like something was missing. I wanted to be kind of connected to what I was playing a little bit more. I wanted to feel like instead of reading the dots off the page, that I was kind of more with it.
You were more what?
And so that's kind of what prompted more creative.
Yeah.
Not that you can't be creative interpreting dots on a page. Absolutely, but right. I don't know. I just felt like there was something else that I wanted more, and so I was dating a jazz pianist at the time, and I said, "Hey, will you show me how to improvise? Will you show me a little bit on the vibes? I'm sure you can give me a couple of hints and get me started." So I spent a summer, dabbling in that, and took some lessons with David Johnson, who's a great LA jazz vibraphone player, as well as other percussion, and picked it up as I went. But I felt at the time like it kind of, if my musicianship was like a pizza, that it was like another piece of the pizza that was there that had been missing prior, and kind of completed the whole pie, if you will.
Yeah. I'm curious about the just sort of the cultural attitude towards music and musicians in London and in Europe versus in America, because the trope is that music and musicians are underappreciated in America, and they're treated, with the respect and regard that they should have in Europe and in other places in the world. Has that been your experience?
Oh, I gotta think about that one. I mean, I have to say that I'm still so new here that my familiarity with the culture of it and the way everything's set up is probably not as familiar as someone who's been here longer than me. But
Right.
My first impressions, I think there is a value on the arts here that I didn't see as much at home. And I think especially, LA definitely has a value on the arts. Although I think the entertainment or like more contemporary arts, entertainment-driven arts, are more focused there, as that is a film town.
It's a commercial value.
Yeah, exactly. And here, people know, if you say Shostakovich, people know who that is.
Right.
You wouldn't necessarily meet people who'd never been to hear a symphony orchestra play. There's a familiarity that people have with the arts that you can tell has been, it's been valued in their education. I worked, when I first got here, I was teaching, so I was working for a music hub in one of the boroughs here in London, and saw, how much money there was put into the arts and into the education of the arts. And, the grass is always greener, because when you talk to people who grew up here, they wouldn't necessarily think that enough focus and attention was put on it. And there may be a case for that, but it was more so than a lot of districts that I had taught in when I was in Southern California.
Yeah.
In the sense that there's a lot of, like, for example, I told you where I grew up had a great music program.
Right.
But one of the reasons that it had that program was partially student funded.
Yeah.
Versus the programs that I've seen and worked in here were state funded. So those students that I worked with had that opportunity to do it regardless of how much money and what background they were coming from. And really enjoyed it too. And then perhaps would have the opportunity to then learn an instrument. And it's kind of cool too, because there are so many orchestras. The orchestras do a lot of outreach with the education communities too. So they'll have, the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra will have a group of students come and hear their rehearsals or play with their musicians to kind of inspire that next level.
Right.
And same thing with other arts.
Yeah.
Not just music. There's just so much of it here.
Yeah. And to be fair, like, I know that programs like you're describing do exist in the United States. It's
Absolutely,
not like a barren landscape, but it just sounds like over there it's a little bit more of a given.
I'd say so. Without having done teaching outside of London, I do know that most of the boroughs in London have a primary music program, which is not the case in most of the boroughs around LA.
Right.
Or you wouldn't call it a borough there, you'd call it a county.
Right.
Or a district.
Yeah. Have you run into, like, when you meet people in London and they say, "What do you do?" and you say, "I'm a musician." What is their reaction?
It's usually, "Oh, cool."
Right.
Who do you play music with?
Right. And I ask that because I think every musician in America has, been in the situation where they're asked, "What do you do?" and they say, "I'm a musician." And the next question is like, "What do you really do? what's your job?"
Yeah. That's always a hard question, because I'm always anticipating that follow-up question. So
yeah.
I think in both the UK and in the US, I tend to kind of jump on it early and say, "Oh, I'm a musician." "Oh, so what music do you play?" "Oh, well, I do a lot of stuff. I teach. I play live performance. I record.
Right.
And I kind of try to give a very brief overview of what the life of a freelance musician looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's mostly, oh, okay, I get it. So you do a lot of like a portfolio career,
right,
is what makes up your work,
right. And I think that's actually people are becoming more receptive to that, because I think people of our generation outside of music, like their careers are starting to resemble ours. Like people have a portfolio career, whether it's in the arts or in entrepreneurship or technology, or like people are kind of piecing together their own careers more so than they used to.
I gotta say, it's really liberating. Like, I saw this YouTube video once that all of the hours of a person's life were represented by jelly beans. Have you seen this video?
No.
So it's just this pile of jelly beans. I was like, this represents your life. Uh-huh. And okay, the average person sleeps, about half their life, so that's gone. Okay, here's your remaining jelly beans. But the average person has a 40-hour-a-week job. So then they take away another, giant portion of jelly beans, and then it was like, okay, here's some more. Here's the jelly beans left, but you got to go to the grocery store, and you got to wash the car, and you've got to do your laundry. So here, this little tiny pile of jelly beans represents your free time that you can do as you like.
Oh God.
And I thought, I am so glad and grateful to be freelance, even with the double-edged sword that it can sometimes be, because though I may not always be rich in financially or sort of stability,
right,
I am always rich in time and doing what I want with my time. Mm-hmm. And that is, to me, that's really valuable and makes me really happy.
Yeah. I always say it might be stressful, it might be, broke sometimes, but it's never boring.
Yeah. It's definitely never boring.
For better or for worse, it is never boring. Well, cool. Is there more coming up with Russell Watson?
Yeah, there might be. I'm not sure I can talk about it at this juncture,
okay,
but he's got some plans. And we're kind of waiting to see how things unravel for him at this point.
Cool.
But I will say I had just the most fun performing with him over the UK this past few months, and what a way to learn a new country. I mean, we saw the biggest, most incredible cities, and we went to a lot of like small, even 500-seat community centers, and right, we had appreciative audiences everywhere.
It reminds me of a few episodes back. I interviewed Wes Anderson, who's the drummer for the Army Jazz Ambassadors, and he just joined that group a couple months ago, and he said it's the same thing. Like, they might be in a 3,000-seat concert hall one night and like literally outside at a rodeo the next night.
Yeah, exactly. I never begin, because I had no preconceived notions of what the cities on the list were going to be like.
Right.
It was always like, what's this one going to be? Is it going to be like this beautiful spa town, or is it going to be like a really small rural community? I have no idea what I was in.
Will there be beer? Yes. Good. Okay.
There always will be.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for talking. It was great to talk to you and great to hear about everything you're doing. And it sounds like you're kicking ass, and it's great to see.
Oh, thanks so much. And I have to say, it was just great to hear from you, because I've also been following you on Facebook and looking and seeing what you're up to. And I'm glad we could stay connected, even though we're living across the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah. And I guess we have our significant others to thank for
definitely.
Where we are. Cheers to them. Here's to marrying up.
Yes. Here's to love.
Stuff never said on the Working Drummer podcast. Isn't she great? I think one of the reasons she was able to go beyond just playing in orchestras was that, in addition to her skills and discipline and enthusiasm for all kinds of music, she's just such a good hang and such a sweetheart. And as we've heard many times on the podcast, that's as important as the playing side, and sometimes more. Now let's check in with Matt Krause to see who's coming up next week.
Hello.
Hey, man, what's up?
Not much, man. How are you?
Very well. So who's coming up next week for you?
Next week we have a guitar player.
Oh, I thought I knew you, man.
I know. Well, we figured we had to cover all the bases. We had a bass player, producer. I've got a good friend of mine, Rob McNally. Rob is originally from Columbus. I've known him for a long time, but he has been killing it here in Nashville, at least for the last decade. His father was in a band called McGuffey Lane, and just last year, Rob won the ACM Guitar Player of the Year.
Wow.
He's been doing great. He's been in the studio with Buddy Guy, Carrie Underwood, Bob Seger, Randy Houser. I mean, just lots of new and upcoming country artists, but obviously established icons of music.
Yeah.
He's toured. He's been touring with Bob Seger recently in the last few years, and I know he's got some great stories with some obviously amazing drummers he's been working with live and in the studio with.
Yeah.
And before that, I think for about 8 or 9 years, he was out on the road with Delbert McClinton. So he's just a super soulful, groovy player. I've had the privilege of doing some gigs with him, and I'm just excited to get his perspective, as you can guess, that so many of us need to hear from other players, especially super badasses like Rob. So that's coming up, man.
Check that out next week. Thanks to Mike Jackson for his technical assistance, and thank you for listening. Bye-bye.